Now, I'll welcome Dr. Raju next. Dr. Raju, if you could turn on your video.
Yeah.
Yes, as he's coming on, just a few lines. Dr. Raju, he initially taught and researched in formal mathematics, analysis, functional analysis, Schwartz distributions, and its application to general relativity and quantum field theory for several years. Later, he joined CDAC to play a key role in building the first Indian supercomputer, Padam. He was responsible for porting applications of national importance, space, oil, etc. And that experience led him to abandon, as he says, formal mathematics. In time, towards a consistent theory, he pointed out a book that was published in 1994. He pointed out that existing physics must use functional differential equations with a tilt in the arrow of time. And this nearly explains quantum mechanics. In the 11 Pictures of Time, published in 2003 by Sage, he proposed a new way to relate science and religion through time. In Cultural Foundations of Mathematics, published in 2007, he proposed a new philosophy of math called Zeroism and compiled evidence for the origin and development of calculus in India and its transmission to Europe. His shorter books include Is Science Western in Origin, Ending Academic Imperialism, Euclid and Jesus. With that brief introduction, I'll request Dr. Raju to take it away from here. Thank you for joining us today, Dr.
Raju. Thank you. Is my mic on? Yes. Thank you very much for inviting me. I will try to move through this at the speed of light. Okay, so because it's a lot to present and I don't have enough time to do that. All right, so my topic is about how the Europeans stole calculus, but that's not the only issue. The issue is, why do we not teach it today? Why do we keep teaching it in the inferior European way? Inferior, that's the point. All right. So, what is the matter? Oh, I have not fixed my... All right, let's use this. Just a minute. I forgot to fix my remote. Okay. All right, sorry for that. Yeah, okay. So West has long boasted of its superiority. And I would like to say it has done so in the most evil and superstitious way. And the classical example of that is the racist claim of white superiority. Why is it superstitious? Because the boast of white superiority is a mutation, as you have in COVID, mutation of the earlier boast of Christian superiority, which was used to morally justify continuation of slavery after black slaves converted to Christianity. So you couldn't say you're enslaving them because they're non-Christian. And it used gross superstitions such as the Bible curse of Ham or Cam. I will not show that link, but these links are there. The whole presentation is online because I have to rush through. I'll only show the essential links. So during colonialism, the boast of white superiority mutated to the boast of Western superiority. This whole theory is described in my 2 long articles on Euclid Must Fall, especially the part 1. And of course, why mutation? Because colonialism was more profitable and because there was a politically useful Aryan race conjecture. Right, so I have a book on that, Aryan race conjecture. And this Aryan race conjecture, I'm sorry. So the point is that the point was that India had been populated by earlier white conquerors. So the claim of white superiority lacked credibility. Now, our encounter with the claim of Western superiority was with Macaulay in his 1835 minute, where he said that in the matter of hard sciences, the superiority of the Europeans becomes absolutely immeasurable. So this was used as justification for colonial education. But this superstition is not specific to Macaulay. It is used by colonizers across the world. And we accepted it without checking it until today. That 75 years after independence, that is most definitely our fault. So how is that relevant to what I'm saying today? Because the trick of using systematic lies about history, systematic lies over centuries. We are not talking about one lie. We're talking about systematic lies over centuries to provide a secular justification for the boast of Christian white Western supremacy. This was used right from the time of Orosius in the 5th century. So, crusading and inquisitional history glorified Christians and Greek friends. It said that all knowledge which was stolen from Muslims during the Crusades was due to early Greeks. And we don't ask for the evidence for that. They'll give you some evidence from some very late manuscript. We accept that. That's wrong. You have to check this. Anyway, on this fanatical history, Christians discovered everything. And not only calculus, but also all of India. And all Vasco discovered India. That's what I was taught in school. Columbus discovered America, and so on. And of course, Vasco did not discover even the sea route. That's a complete fib, because it was known for 5,000 years from before him. Alexander knew about it. So this myth of Western supremacy or Christian supremacy was carried forward by racist historians, then by colonial historians, who just conveniently relabeled the Greeks as whites and then as West. So no use blaming Macaulay, because we continue to teach that false history. For example, about Euclid in our school texts, we tried to correct it with Meg, and it did not really work because the government is intent on doing it that way. Now there is a trick. See, the fanatical and farcical part of it is that Christians and West did everything first. But there are subtler aspects. The subtler aspect is that you inject a claim of superior philosophy into history. And this trick, Indians never understood. All right, not a single book on the history of Indian mathematics discusses its philosophy of Ganit. I tried to introduce that when I was on the board of JICPR, but Murli Manoj Joshi sacked me. He thought that only Sanskrit Pandit should do Indian philosophy. But Ganit is not equal to math. And Sanskrit Pandits could not translate even one word correctly for centuries because they didn't study mathematics. They thought it is inessential. But if you want to translate, you must know both the context. You must understand mathematics and also Sanskrit. So anyway, the first accession of step that I made of calculus was in my 2000 Hawaii article, paper and article at the East-West Conference, which was published in the Philosophy Journal. And that is very important. It was published in a philosophy journal because we think of, when we think of history, we think only about chronology. We did it first. No, that's not on. We did it first. It's all right. But we have to look at other issues because we continue to teach calculus on Western principles. So we implicitly admit that we are inferior. So instead of just the gorilla boasting, you also have this little monkey crying. We did it first, but we did it inferior. You know, it is really tragic because we don't get into the thing. We are accepting, we are teaching calculus, not the way it developed in India, but the way it was misunderstood in the West, because we accept our inferiority. We teach geometry, Euclidean geometry, not Sutra geometry, not the geometry we developed in India of Raju Ganit, because we accept we are inferior. And no use saying we are superior when you accept in practice, in action. So the exact grounds on which the West asserts and you accept its superiority is unimportant. Whether you say you did it first or they did it better, the thing is that, see, Africans continued to be slaves, whether it was because they were non-Christians or because the Christian God has cursed them to be black. Okay, same applies to us. Which ground we accept it on history or philosophy does not matter. And the fact is, we accept that Western philosophy is superior because we teach calculus in all universities in this country based on Western philosophy. We could not change this teaching. Anyway, since most people don't understand the Western philosophy of calculus, which is real numbers, limits, etc., nor do they understand the Indian philosophy of calculus, let me give you a simple example from school geometry. So Harshvardhan said this, if you remember, in 2015 in the Science Congress. He said that we did it first. So here, for example, is the Hindu headline. So originated in India. So the important point is they originated here. That's all that he looked at. And she should have addressed the Purva Paksha. Indian tradition of this debate says before you put forward your Paksh, address the Purva Paksha. Where is the Purva Paksh? It is stated in the class 9 school text. Everybody should know it. Certainly the Minister for Science and Technology. And what does the Purva Paksh say? It says that some civilizations like Babylon, India, Rome, they did not do geometry correctly. They had only some results, practical results. But the Greeks did it right. They were looking at the reasoning why certain constructions work. This is the Purva Paksh. This is what the government teaches. It says that what Greeks did was superior geometry. And we are not able to check it. We can't even check whether Euclid existed. It's just complete falsehood. But anyway, we are talking only about philosophy. So the Purva Paksh is not that the Greeks did it earlier, but that the Greeks did it better. And you cannot contest it by saying we did it first. All right. So it's not a proper response, all right, to someone who says they did it better. So instead we should ask, West has made so many stupid and superstitious claims of superiority down the centuries, where Christians are superior, whites are superior, and so on. So is the claim of a superior philosophy of math another such stupid and superstitious claim? And my answer is yes, all right. And note clearly that when they claim it is better, they don't mean better practical value. You know, if you look at the Bodhayan Shubha Sutra, I won't go, Manav Shubha Sutra is better, but I won't go into that. Bodhayan Shubha Sutra and Euclid's element 1.47 proposition, they are identical. And so when you say better, it just means that better, you arrived at it by a better method. So that needs to be debated, discussed. We never questioned it because we internalized the belief in Western superiority, which is at the core of colonial education. So the school text boasts of Western superiority in math is based on brazen lies. If you just check, it is immediately collapses. So they say, for example, only Greek mathematics has had proof. Obviously false. Whether or not Greek mathematics had proof, obviously false, because Indian Ganit used the methods of proof. We have stock methods of proof. They are stated in the Nyaya Sutra. 2. Pratyaksh, Anuman, Apman, Shabda, Pramanani, that's it. And there are explicit examples here in my lecture where you use Pratyaksh, where you use Anuman, where you use Upman. At the moment, the talk is about Anuman. And so Earth is a sphere was reasoned from the inferred, from the fact, deduced from the fact that tall trees cannot be seen, as stated by Lalla. It was deduced by Aryabhat states it first, but Lalla explains it. So the other thing that only only Greeks use reasoning, completely false. So Indian Ganit did use deductive reasoning, and just pointed out his deduction that the earth is round. He didn't go to space and see it from there. It was not Pratyaksh, it was Anuman. So why don't they explain the truth? Point is, why do you have to tell lies to claim superiority? Because it's a superstitious, stupid belief, and they survives on the fact that nobody will check it. And if they check it, they won't have the courage to talk about it. So the difference is both use deduction. All right, Ganit use deduction, math use deduction. It is not unique to the West, but it is the starting point of deduction which is different. In Indian Ganit, the starting point is facts or observation. I see the far off tree, I don't see the far off trees, and I don't see the ship when it disappears over the horizon, and that is Pratyaksh. But in Western formal mathematics, the empirical is prohibited. All right, this is what our school text says. Beware of being deceived by what you see. A mathematical proof cannot contain any Pratyaksh aspect. And you can see it also on text in mathematical logic. But I'm giving you this from the 9th standard text, which everybody ought to know, ought to read carefully. This is what it says. All right, empirical is prohibited in formal mathematics. So the starting point of deduction must be an axiom. An axiom is not self-evident truth. It is a postulate, which again the class 9 text admits. Axioms and postulates are used interchangeably and then goes up into some grammar nonsense. So axioms is the same as postulate, is the same as assumption. But the point is that this assumption is usually metaphysical. When you talk of a point having, a line having infinity of points, a line being infinity, you're talking of infinity. And infinity is metaphysics, and metaphysics is fantasy. Whose fantasy? It is the fantasy of the West. And this fantasy of infinity is closely related to church dogmas of eternity. And all the axioms of mathematics, look at all of that theory and so on, it's all laid down by the West. Von Neumann, Bernays, Gödel, you use that theory. How do you use it? Who wrote down the axioms? If I don't want it, if I don't want real numbers, you have to take their permission. You can't do it. So that's the point. They have political control over the content of mathematics. If I want to teach, nobody will allow. Professor Karp was in charge. We wrote to him. He did not respond to the idea of teaching calculus differently. We are not even willing to try it, even testing. We are so frightened of it. So this is strong political control, which frightens most people to even try, even think about it, talk about it. So it's like the Inquisition. So point is that just to make a quick interim summary, the purported superiority of formal math does not mean superior practical value. This is the same in the case of calculus. When you say real numbers and limits, you can't use real numbers in practice. All right, it just means superior political value. That's for the West, not for us. It's anti-value for us to submit to such techniques of mind control. All right. So now I want to just say the kind of history you're familiar with, that contrary to assertions of Western superiority, the fact is, in known history, let's not talk of fantasy history. Archimedes did something sometime, and Eratosthenes did something, or Euclid did something. They are not historical figures. We know nothing about them. We know things only from very, very late texts. So, in actual fact, in actual known history, Europeans learnt all their math from India. They repeatedly imported it, and the most important point, they found it difficult to understand because it was imported knowledge, it was copied knowledge, like a copy student who copies finds it difficult to understand what he's copying. Therefore, he copies. So found it difficult to understand, therefore they acquired an inferior knowledge of it. That's why. So let's take quickly arithmetic. We know that, I suppose everybody knows this. It went from Hisab al-Hind of al-Khwarizmi, and the very term zero, as you know, is from Sifra. What you may not have seen is the Oxford English Dictionary, which gives its derivation. So I showed you that quickly. Just check it out in Oxford English Dictionary. It's a mysterious code. And that's what a cipher is. Why mysterious? Because Roman arithmetic, which the Europeans used, did not have place value. And they were confused by the place value system because Roman arithmetic is additive. I have dwelt on that in great length in my book on the Aryan race conjecture, that they say that, Greek and Latin and Sanskrit were similar, but they did not have similar arithmetic. Language may be similar, so what? They did not have similar arithmetic, therefore they did not have similar calendar, therefore they did not have similar culture. And we just neglected it, so everything was done only by linguists. All right. Now look at De Morgan. De Morgan was mentioned. De Morgan's laws in logic is such a fool, such an absolute idiot. He writes, and he's very influential mathematics. So he writes that negative numbers are evil. And in fact, because Roman arithmetic has no negative numbers, it is pebble arithmetic. How do you have negative pebbles? You don't have. So from Fibonacci to De Morgan, people are confused about negative numbers. Some understood, some did not. So this is what he wrote, De Morgan, that negative numbers are impossible. All right, so he says you can say 10 minus 20 plus 50 is impossible. But 10 plus 50 minus 20 is possible. And he is a professor at University College London. He is writing in the 19th century. He is not writing in some remote past. We are not talking of fantasy history. We're talking about real history. This book is available on the archive. All right. And then he says that, well, you're saying minus 9 less than 0. This was the critical point on which Europeans misunderstood calculus. They did not understand ordering, not of integers, but of polynomials. I won't go into that. So he says that the belief in witches is 10,000 times more likely, all right, than saying minus a less than 0, because how can something be less than nothing? And he has attributed some meaning to the term 0, completely wrong. And this is what he says. This is what the fellow says. It is 10,000 times more possible to believe in witches and in judicial astrology. At least you guys should have a laugh at De Morgan Day every year. So we know that algebra was from algebra wal muqabla. Jabra is force, jabardasti. Muqabla is an equation because you have two sides of an equation which are contesting. And you have the word surd from Latin surdus. Again, assume you have not seen it. This is again the Oxford English Dictionary in case you have not actually checked it. It is there in the Oxford English Dictionary. All right. So surd comes from surdus, which means deck, and y is square root of 2 depth. We understand that because in the Shilpa Sutra, root 2 is the diagonal Karn of a unit square. But Karn, as in the warrior Karn who had these earrings, it also means ear. So bad Karna was mistranslated as bad ear, depth, and from Arabic to Latin, they blindly copied it. So you know the root by which it is. Same way the word sign that you use comes from the Arabic jab. And again, jab is from pocket. Again, let me show you the OED because I don't think people show you all this stuff because this is accepted by the OED. This is how the word sign originates. And why is jab sign? Because the word that Aryabhat uses is arzaja. Ja, because it relates to the circle. And it was written as the consonantal skeleton, and they misunderstood it. If you have Jaba, they said, what is Jaba? It's not Jiva. It's not Jiva. It must be Jab. And then in my pre-test question for calculus without limits, I asked them in trigonometry, define, you please tell me what is sine of 92 degrees. How can you have sine of 92 degrees? Because that's what they say, because if you define it in terms of a right angle triangle, if you're talking of trigonometry and not circlemetry, then you have to talk of triangles. So that's all wrong. All right. So this is what happens. I think that point is clear that Europeans were arithmetically backward until the 16th century. And this is very clear from the Gregorian calendar, which did not have fractions, does not use proper fractions. And therefore, equinox does not come on the same day each year. It's a bad calendar even today, even after the Gregorian reform, the Christian calendar. It was accepted as the official Christian calendar at the Council of Nicaea. Okay. So it does not come on the same day because it's a bad calendar. So don't tell me that leap years are the same as precise fractions. If you had used precise fractions, this would happen. It's only on a 1,000-year average. All right. So how did they jump from ignorance of fractions in 1582 to calculus in the 17th century, 1600 something? So it took 1,000 years in India to go from Aryabhat to Madhav, claimed by Newton. And how did it happen overnight in Europe? Obviously, they cheated. So the question then is, did Europeans steal calculus from India? Now, there are two questions here. First question is, was it calculus at all? A lot of people contested. That's why I'm putting it up front. Once you decide whether it was calculus or not, then you can ask the question of whether they stole. So most people, how do they do calculus? They do integrals and derivatives formally only of elementary functions. So if you take a non-elementary function, as in my pre-test question paper, they don't know how to do it. So here's a non-elementary function. Here's a non-elementary integral. Leads to Jacobian elliptic function. They don't know how to do it because it's not taught. It's not there in any of the calculus texts. So they identify symbolic computation of derivatives and integrals with calculus. Especially that is what the foolish colonized mind does, which is taught to ape the superior West. But there are no integrals or derivatives in the tradition. There are the signs for integral, there's the sign for derivative. So how was it calculus? And this is a doubt which many people say. And Bard, A.K. Bard, who has done a lot for history of mathematics in India, who was at the INSA, he said, I had written a paper on transmission of calculus, which was submitted to the Indian Journal of History of Science. He said, I personally feel that the question of transmission of calculus from India to Europe is basically a hypothetical issue. What are you talking about? Calculus didn't exist in India. Where are the integrals? Where are the derivatives? Tell me. So that is a critical question, which even people who are well versed in the Indian tradition don't understand. And nobody else has pointed out, I don't know why. But then if you start teaching calculus on the Indian method, you immediately come to the answer. But we don't teach it. We avoid it. We are going to imitate the superior West. We are going to feel superior by imitating them. So that also brings in a crucial question of Aryabhat versus Madhav. So today we attribute the origin of calculus to Madhav and Kerala school. That is wrong. That is how Wish first noticed it. And they have infinite series, but you can't teach calculus based on infinite series. I mean, I also started my research based on that assumption because that's a popular view. So this was my project, which was about Madhav and the origin of the calculus. All right. So I started with that idea, but it's a wrong idea. I corrected myself when I started teaching calculus without limit. You can't attribute it to Madhav because you have to teach it the way Aryabhat did it. So calculus due to Aryabhat, Madhav gave the same 24 sign values. He gave them precise to the third sexagesimal minute, Tatpara. But Aryabhat had given those same 24 sign values 1,000 years earlier, less precise, only up to the Kala, first sexagesimal minute. So, critical difference. Madhav gives sign values. Those are sign values. All right? Actual values. But Aryabhat gives only sign differences. So, Aryabhat's sign table looks like this. No, I mean, there's only one word of Sanskrit in it. So it is Aryabhat sign table. There's only one word, which is Kala Ardhaja. Kala Ardhaja. So sign so it's actually sign differences, Khandaja, but he says Ardhaja. So they are only sign differences. What are those words? What do they mean? They mean these numbers. So they are not sign values, they are sign differences. So that's a very critical difference because Indians used finite differences, not derivative. So you have at least got the finite difference. Whether you should have the derivative or not, second question, why should you have the derivative? Why should you imitate the West? Finite differences work perfectly well for all practical purposes. For everything that I did in CDAC, every differential equation that I solved on a computer is done by finite differences. You don't need anything else. You don't need derivative. That comes from a Western superstition. We'll go to that. So do not assume that they are better or superior. So how were they derived? He derived them by means of a recurrence relation, not an algebraic relation. Now I'll just go through it. This is the recurrence relation. This is done in my book in great detail. It is not an algebraic equation. Let's be very clear about it. And it is what is called the Euler method. This is also explained in my book, Cultural Foundations of Mathematics. Euler method, you can add an H, which is what Neelkant did, and that gives you some greater accuracy. That is how there was accuracy to the third sexagesimal case. So I won't go into that. The point is that Euler was familiar with Indian mathematical texts. It was not some independent discovery. He was familiar with Indian mathematical texts. He knew he solved Fermat's challenge problem, which nobody else could solve because it was a solved exercise in Bhaskar. And he knew that text. And therefore, nobody else could solve it. All right? We don't go into these things because Kim Propker will tell us some nonsense about what Euler did, and we believe her. Never believe the West. Challenge it, check it. Only when you have checked it yourself, you should believe. Okay. So, no need for derivatives. What about integrals? You don't need them either because you need those finite differences. You solve differential equation. That is what Aryabhat did. He solved the differential equation for numerically solved the differential. You can't have exact solutions. You can't have even sine function, etc. It's not exact. Infinite series. So he numerically solved the differential equation, and that is the heart of the calculus. Every application of calculus that you have got, every problem of Newtonian physics that you have got involves a solution of differential equations. Also true of quantum mechanics, I'm not going into that. So corollary, you don't need the derivative sign, you don't need the integral sign. That is just your indoctrination. That calculus is about integral signs and derivative signs. So you just solve the differential equation, y prime equal to fx, you get the indefinite integral to x f t dt. Right? That's it. You don't need an integral sign. You don't need that. You've got all the practical applications and doing everything fine. It's perfectly clear. You don't have to worry about limits and real numbers and so on. And I have been writing about this for so long. Nobody seems to have understood. I am really surprised. So this way of doing calculus, I would say, is superior. That's why I teach it for all real life practical applications, since there is no need to restrict fx to be an elementary function. So I gave the example of Jacobian elliptic function. This is asked in my test. So here are the Jacobian elliptic functions. Oh no, this is not asked in, okay. This is about the simple pendulum. A simple pendulum, you get the wrong formula, T equal to 2 pi root over L by G. This is a first scientific experiment. And you give the wrong formula, and people believe the formula, they don't trust their observation, because that is the essential teaching. Don't trust the pratyaksh. You trust the theory, trust authority, trust Shabda Praman, not the pratyaksh. All right, so we give a wrong formula and everybody repeats it. I had to have such a big fight. And my son did a good project on that. And it is here. So the formula is not compatible. And here is the whole, you can see the whole project, that the time period of the simple pendulum changes with the amplitude. You can observe it. You'll find the observations here. You'll find the theory here. You'll find the Jacobian elliptic functions. That's the way I teach calculus. All right, this is a key aspect of how you teach calculus today, but we don't want it. We want to ape the West. That is our fundamental principle. We want to ape the West. All right. So, point is, Euler method is linear interpolation, extrapolation. Brahmagupta introduced quadratic interpolation. So he said, those traditional sign values are good enough. Why do you want to go to 24 values? And you can do that. And that went on to, Vateshwar went to quadratic interpolation. A Stirling's formula took a table of 96 values and achieved precision to second sex adjustments. And that is what is carried forward by Madhav and Kerala school, who used 11th, 12th order interpolation to achieve precision to third minute. So they refined it. Certainly they contributed to it. All right, but Aryabhat and Brahmagupta invented it. This was a refinement. You can still do all calculus with just the Euler method. Okay, so there is just a postscript. Aryabhat was a Dalit. I have a paper on that. You can read it. And unlike Nilkant, who was a high caste Nambudiri Brahmin, there's a political angle, right? And to my mind, it's a splendid testimony of regional integration and the fact that caste was not oppressive in India. That Nilkant, who's a Somasutwan, can accept, Aryabhat can accept to be a disciple, is a very great thing. North and South. We are in the North, Kerala is in the South, but I won't go further. So no one in India is anyway interested in teaching calculus differently. We just want to say we are superior. All right, we are proud we did it first, and we are inferior, therefore we'll continue to ape the rest. I've shown you those two photos of a gorilla and a monkey. I won't show it. So we still do that because that's what is needed for IIT entrance, and that is what is needed for high-paying jobs, and that's what we are. We are not interested in better knowledge or a better way of doing calculus. Okay, so let me go to theft of calculus. Arithmetic, algebra were all cases of transmission, not theft. Because they went via Muslims who honestly acknowledged the Indian sources. Al-Khwarizmi wrote Hisab al-Hind. He mentioned it has come from Hind. But the case of calculus and probability and statistics are different. They're a matter of theft because they went directly to Christian Europe from India. And Europeans came discovery. Why? Because they have a superstitious, utterly evil principle dogma of Christian discovery. Please take a look at that meaning of Christian discovery. What it means, what sort of genocide it led to, what sort of slavery it led to, and so on. I won't go into further details. It has recently been repealed. And there is also, it's taking so long to load. Never mind. It's not important. There is a video on that with Sanjay Dixit because the Pope has recently repealed it. But the British and US laws are still based on it. So we teach in our school text that Newton discovered calculus. Because we have the West, there's a picture of Newton. That's what we expect when you talk of calculus. First lesson in calculus is that Newton discovered it. You show his photo. Whether you say it or not, you show his photo there, that children get the idea. Now, in my case, because we are talking about theft, it's a Newton stole. All right, so theft means there should be proof, different standard of proof, as in criminal law, since theft is a criminal offense. So I said, let's use this standard of proof using criminal law, which is proof beyond reasonable doubt, not proof based on balance of probabilities. So in my Hawaii 2000 paper, so you see this. This is the three points that I mentioned: motivation, opportunity, documentary evidence, and circumstantial evidence. These are the things I looked at. It's a paper in philosophy, but it talks about history. All right. So the opportunity was, of course, that the Jesuits were in Cochin. Motivation was the navigational problem. They needed a correct calendar. They needed precise values to navigate because their entire wealth depended on correct navigation. And there is ample circumstantial evidence. There are identical infinite series. There is Fermat's challenge problem, Pascal's triangle, Euler method, Tychonic model, Clavier's trigonometric values, Stirling's formula, etc. then there is documentary evidence. Although when you talk of catching, convicting a murderer or a thief, you don't assume that you will always get a signed confession. You very rarely do. So, opportunity. So let's first understand the, Let's understand the Toledo model. What were the Jesuits doing in Cochin? They were following. The church imitates its past models which are very successful. So the first Western university, Paris, Oxford, Cambridge, I won't talk of Bologna, was set up by the church during the Crusades. Because Christian Europe was backward. There was a Christian Europe and a Muslim Europe. Christian Europe was backward and needed the knowledge. And the texts that they used were Latin mass translations of Arabic texts. If you want to know which ones, please click that link. I'm not going to click it now since I'm short of time. So the church had earlier burnt heretical texts, but it needed the knowledge to fight and win the Crusades. And so it claimed those texts, but they had to be theologically correct. And therefore it said those texts are all written by our soul friends. They were called soul friends of Christians, the Greeks, early Greeks, not late Greeks. So this same Toledo model was imitated in India. Steal knowledge, lie about it. It's so easy and nobody will check. Nobody checked for 500 years. So the church rightly texts that most people are gullible fools. They will never check. And they systematically collected and translated with the help of local Syrian Christians. They had formed a bond right early. And later it was attributed to Christians, Fermat, Newton, Leibniz, etc., like Vasco da Gama discovered India. And I think I already said that they wanted the navigational problem. But what is the navigational problem? Three critical issues: latitude, loxodromes, and longitude at sea. So latitude, well, Vasco did not know how to determine latitude. He carried back the navigational instrument used by his Indian navigator, described in my book in great detail. And he said he will have it graduated in inches. I'm sorry that smiley has not come. It can't be done because it's not a linear scale, it uses a harmonic scale. So Kamal tells latitude by the pole star. It is limited to use at night. Prapalagai, night instrument is what it's called in Malayalam. So pole star is equal to cow. It's called cow in Arabic Malayalam, which is the language that the mufflers in that sail on these seals use. And it also means teeth. The instrument is held between the teeth. So Vasco said the pilot was telling the distance by his teeth. So he noted that. So there still remained a problem because you could tell latitude only at night. But you can also, for that, to tell it by day, you measure the angular elevation of the sun, and you can do that provided you have a good calendar. This is explained in my Raju Ganit geometry text for class 9. So you have all these practical applications. You measure the size of the earth, you measure the angle of the dip, and then you measure angle latitude in daytime. But we do Euclidean geometry. We are not going to do any of these things. You cannot do any of these things with a compass box. And we are completely committed to imitating India, the Europeans till the end of our lives. We don't care. We only want to pass the exam. The knowledge is not about anything but passing exams, getting a job. I pressed the wrong button. Okay. So Christian priests are interested to steal the calendrical knowledge, and the reform of the Christian calendar was done in 1582. Why? Because it was known from the 4th century. 5th century it was known. Hilarius started his reforms. Hilarius is spelled with a U, but it is Hilarius all the same. Then there was the problem of loxodromes. What is the problem of loxodromes? They navigated by plane charts. So it's a straight line. Straight line is the basis of geometry. So you move in one direction, you'll move in a straight line all the way to infinity. Complete nonsense. If you are moving on the straight of the on the earth, if you move in one fixed direction with a compass, you will go into a logarithmic spiral, except in cardinal directions. You'll go into a logarithmic spiral that spirals towards the pole. That's why it is called a loxodrome. Loxodrome means curved line. They're very puzzled by this feature. And how do you correct it? So you have the Mercator chart, which is the common map of the world, Mercator projection. Now the projection is copied from China, and Needham has demonstrated that. But wait a minute, you want to construct that projection. So to construct the map, you require accurate trigonometric values, tables of seconds. If you look at the 16th century navigational manuals in Europe, they are full of such tables, like Simon Seven's table, which is taken from Aryabhat. It's correct to the first minute. Now, Clavius, 1607, published tables with precision of 9 decimal place, third successive decimal unit. And he was in charge of the Jesuit affairs, and obviously he was the first recipient of these things. Let's go to longitude. Now, important thing is that in Indian tradition, longitude was measured, but it requires knowledge of radius of the earth. So we knew, and these chaps did not know. So this is what Brahmagupta says. Bhuvyasasya jnana vyartham deshantaram. What are you doing about Deshantar if you don't know Bhuvyas? And it's easily calculated from elementary trigonometry. It's not in my 9th standard text. It's not elsewhere. What is there? You just measure the height of a hill. You climb the hill. You see the angle of dip. And you measure that theta. You measure the height. And there you have the radius of the earth. Very simple calculation. My students do it. And you can calculate the angle so accurately. But you need precise trigonometric values. All right. But mathematically backward universities could not do it. And therefore, they had a navigational problem. And fact of the navigational problem is that British legislated a longitude price in 1711 and gave it away half in 1762 because they were not sure it had been won. Okay, so why did they have such a big problem? Because Columbus underestimated the size of the earth in order to get funding for his project of traveling west to go east. And then his success meant it was fixed, and then Portuguese, they banned the carrying of loads above ships. They led to disasters. Now you have bunkum stories about Eratosthenes. Do you have any primary source for Eratosthenes? So many stories everywhere. Not a single one will give you the primary source. All right. Or you talk about Picard. Picard, this great measurement is mentioned by Newton. But you see, navigators, their life goes on that. They were not willing to trust Picard. So therefore, the navigational problem persisted. Don't look at history in retrospect. Look at it in prospect. All right. So let's go to circumstantial evidence. And that I've already mentioned the long list, science series, Leibniz series. Fermat's challenge problem is especially interesting because it is a solved exercise in Bhaskar. And the numbers involved for the solution are very large. Although it's so large. So how can you say it's independent rediscovery? It's complete nonsense. But then that is what people say. And nobody in Europe could do this problem except for Euler, who had access to Indian texts. So this is why the Aryabhatta method is Euler method. You have Neil Kant's astronomical model. It's exactly the Tychonic model. Tycho was astronomer royal to the Holy Roman Empire. And therefore, he was the natural recipient of astronomical models taken from India. And Clavius' trigonometric value, the Ahargan, Julian day number. Julius Scaliger was a contemporary of Scaliger, or of Clavius. Then Boteshwar, that is Stirling's formula, all Christian discoveries. So documentary evidence, there is this Ritchie's handwritten letter which I got. Oh, I'm sorry, it's not there. But it is there if you see my MIT lecture or whatever, there are many places, calendar talk, I have shown this letter. I have marked it here, I'm sorry. Now let me go to the most interesting part, which is the epistemic test. You have so much evidence, but has the West admitted that it's told? You have dishonest historians like David Pingree and Kim Plopker. They'll keep alive. They won't even discuss. They'll make sure never to discuss. I told Pingree long back, I'm willing to come and talk in your department. Will you talk? No, I don't have time. And we Indians admitted that also. IIT Gandhinagar had a conference. They invited Plopker, but not me. We want to preserve the Western myths. So I applied the epistemic test because you have such censorship and so on. They won't let you publish. They won't let you talk. But at least there should be very solid proof that those who steal knowledge, like students who cheat in an exam, they have inferior knowledge. And when they are caught cheating, they always lie. So what I did was that I developed as a teacher a way to catch the cheats after the fact. So when you return the answer sheets to them, you ask them questions. You wrote this answer. What did you mean by this? Can you explain? And they are not able to explain. They are not able to explain, then they have stolen. Whatever they say doesn't matter. And now when you apply it to history, you can't interrogate the past. But if you have suspicious circumstances, then at least you will admit that the European thing came later, and there is very high level of suspicion, at least. I mean, according to solid proof, but at least you admit that. Yeah, what did you say? I have 10 minutes.
No. Dr. Raju, we are close to the end, so I'll request you to
My watch
summarize.
is saying 10 minutes. I have kept the watch in front of me. I'll need 10 minutes, please. So the critical issue we have here is that it doesn't matter. Let's flip the schedule a bit. So how to do an infinite sum and how to exactly define the derivative. These are the aspects of calculus which the West did not understand. And why is it needed? Because the trigonometric values were derived by using infinite series of sine, cosine, and arctangent functions. And Indians had some of the infinite geometric series. Nilkant had summed it. And finite geometric series, of course, known for a very long time, from Egyptian times and from Vedic times. But they did not understand how it was done, because if you want to sum as a one by one, it is going to be a super task, an infinite series of tasks. So Descartes said it's beyond the human mind. And Galileo left the task to Cavalieri. He had access to the Indian calculus text. He left it to Cavalieri. And then Newton defined the derivative using his silly fractions, which are now abandoned. So you can look at this epistemic test. People had problems. So this is a very critical issue. Hang on, please hang on. This is very important. Let me cover it. 5 minutes won't make a big difference. So Berkeley acknowledged it, and James Turing gave a very incomprehensible defense of fractions. So therefore, Dedekine proposed real numbers as a better way to understand calculus. And all calculus is done that way today, including in the Indian class 11 text, and infinite sense, derivatives, integrals, even functions, sine function, cosine function, all defined as limits. So there are no limits in rational numbers, so you need real numbers. But Newton and Leibniz could not have understood that because they came long after that. And today, Newton's fractions are aligned. And of course, why is exactitude needed? You need that metaphysical exactitude. It's not exactitude in reality. Because of the superstition, Newton linked calculus to physics and physics to religious belief. He talked of laws of motion. They are laws of God, and that is part of the post-crusading theology of eternal and universal laws of God, which are in contradiction to the Islamic thought. So I'll skip this. Let me go to this last part of my talk, which I think is very important, which is about history repeating itself. So first time as tragedy, second time as farce, and the third time as pure humbug. That's my correction. History repeats itself. So first time tragedy, we know it was stolen. Second time farce, the thesis that the calculus was stolen from India was itself stolen by a combination of Roman Catholics and Syrian Christians in a pre-planned way. And, I advertised the post of postdoc for my INSA project. Maybe you can just quickly take a look at it. So this is a very radical new project, and this is what I advertised for, and people saw it. And particularly George Joseph saw it because he was on that list. And then I had a postdoc, Jolly John, as a research associate. He was a Syrian Christian. So George Joseph saw it. He sent delegates, Almeida after me, who contacted me indirectly. A complete traitor, though he posed as a fake patriot, and said he was very interested in doing something, and I felt for it. I must admit I was fooled. So Joseph starts serially plagiarizing because we had some we disagreed, and then started plagiarizing. The conference in December 2000, he shamelessly plagiarized my paper in front of me. This was a paper that I had submitted to his conference in Trivandrum. And he was the organizer, so he had privileged access, misused it, and just shamelessly plagiarized because they are pretty sure that you can never catch them. You will never be able to catch them. Therefore, they keep repeating this plagiarism. So later he just said, I'll say, I don't know you, because he has an email written to me about the Lever Room project. We are trying to raise 100,000 pounds. All right. In his Trivandrum conference, he wiped me out. All right. It's completely illegal. You should have taken my copyright permission. There are absolutely no ethics. And many laud him. Many people think he's a great chap. He has done something. He's pointed out that calculus was taken. He stole it from me. So point is, if you think that the calculus was stolen, if the thesis that calculus was stolen can itself be stolen, that is acceptable, then you might as well accept the theft of the calculus. Now, Clark wrote an article in Sureka saying 3 British authors wrote about the Indian calculus, and he sent copies, and that's how I got it. But none of them were British, all 3 were Christians, and Dennis Almeida and some inconsequential Western translator. And the point is that there was an ethics committee at Exeter. Here's the report of the ethics committee. George Joseph, well, it's not loading, forget it, it is there online. He said, I am a neutral party, though he himself was a prejudiced. And he lied that Barg had talked to the possibility of transmission calculus, and Barg denies it. And Katz, nobody talked about it. Neither did he. So anyway, the committee was obliged to roll in my favor. And this is the news item on that. Okay, this is my time going off, 5 minutes left according to my watch. I'm sorry, our clocks are differing. Happens. So I got some letters of apology from Jolly John, from Dennis Almeida. All right, he wants to unconditionally apologize and so on, after he was thrown out of Exeter because of this. But they go right back plagiarizing. So it's the 3rd time. Anyway, epistemic test proves that they copied. They did not understand my point about a good calendar, and they said declination can be measured at sea. So another example is from George Joseph. So this is what he writes. 15th century onward, the Kerala mathematicians used computational mathematics as floating point numbers. My Hawaii paper talked about floating point numbers, saying you don't need real numbers. They did not understand. And said, do you understand the notion of infinitesimal and derived infinite series? What nonsense. So this is the level of nonsense that you can expect from plagiarists. That's exactly what Newton and others did. They did not understand. And 3rd time is pure humbug. That this was in 2007. They verbatim plagiarized my paper. And Joseph called himself the author. And there are examples of that. And there was a huge media blitz. This is done in my... not loading. Let's leave it to load. So the point is that the fake news release from Manchester, Indian press refused to believe it. Only Hindustan Times checked the facts, published a retraction of the fake news on its front page. That is here. Very few people know about it. People still keep talking about this is the George Joseph serial plagiarist, which is there on my blog. So anyway, point I'm making now is that a complaint was made, and the article is still there. They just put in an acknowledgement to me. They said it's a media office mistake. Verbatim copying, they did not acknowledge, because that is the British ethical and legal standard. And Manchester University is committed to that lack of ethics. British are committed to it. The fake news, it is still there. 16 years after the fact, the paper was never published. All right. So they stole, and you can't correct this theft by concerning calculus in the present tense. You can't do that. You have no hope of correcting the old time. Okay, so let me go to the conclusions. Europeans were backward. They developed an inferior understanding of calculus. The claims of discovery that is settled by what you teach, not by church dogmas or regional chauvinism. So if you accept real numbers and limits, which you do in all your schools, in all your IIT texts, then you are gone, you accept the superiority of the best. So Aryabhat and Brahmagupta discovered calculus, not Madhava or Kerala school, which refined it using infinite series. By correcting, but the point is that correcting the lies of history is a process, not a one-time job to be done after 500 years. And the only process we know is trust the West. Why trust it? Manchester University did it, so trust it. You won't check the facts. So therefore, they are aware of it. Therefore, they keep concocting new lies, and they will keep doing it, because your only standard of proof is trust the West, and you don't. They know you have no way of correcting it. That's just kind. Thank you very much. I'm sorry I took a little extra time. Not really extra time on my watch, but anyway. Thanks. The difference of time, if not of opinion. Okay.
Thank you, Professor Raju. Thank you for your insights, and thank you for sharing your experience. We wish we had more time. We had people from different geographies and time zones joining for this conference.